on. Welcome everyone to ACDE number 197. Basically, two big things to chat about today. So first is Live implementation and minor spec updates on the Pectra work. I think it makes sense to first go through this and make sure we're all on the same page around where things are at. And then next up, talking about the Pectra scope. So we discussed splitting the fork on the last call. It seems there was some rough consensus around the first half, but then a lot of open questions around what to do about the second half. Many people and teams have shared their thoughts since then, so we can have a discussion around that. Then a couple minor things around as well, but those are the two big ones. First, I guess to kick us off, does anyone want to give an update on where things are with Devnet 3 right now?
Yeah, so we've had Devnet 3 running for a bit now, and there has been the Teku Aragon fix that's already been deployed. And I think the Teku team or the Aragon team was looking at illegal state exception that's happening there. Besides that, Lighthouse has a state root mismatch. It could potentially be a memory issue on the node, but yeah, we still have to figure out what's going on there. Besides those 2 points, there's one sort of deposit test that Philip, like PK, has done from the team, and he's written down some observations here. So please have a look. And I don't know, Philip, do you want to maybe say something about the deposit test?
Yep, can do. We basically tried to fill up the pending deposit queue on Pectra with 1,000 pending deposits to see how the network behaves. And we expected increase of the EPO transition times because most clients need to recompute the hashing times 100,000. And yeah, that could already also be observed, but more significantly is that Xatu showed quite badly increased block propagation time during these timeframes. And we are not sure where this is coming from, but yeah, basically further investigation is needed to find out the root case here.
Yeah, thanks. And Mikhail's already, I think, posted a change in the consensus specs that should potentially help with this. So we will be like redoing this analysis once some PR is done, or if there's some new proposal or rate limiting or whatever we choose. We definitely want to make sure that this is not happening before we start doing, I guess, more public devnets, etc. Even though that 100,000 deposits is a large number, especially because mainnet has like 1.1 million 1 million validators, but still, it's something we've observed for now. Besides that, we've slowly started planning for DevNet 4. DevNet 4 is essentially the same scope as DevNet 3, along with a bunch of open EIPs, ideally with everything related to Builder also, with the MEV workflow also included. There's a bunch of open PRs as well as clarifications. So please have a look. And I guess we should first focus on merging those in and finishing the discussions. And ideally, we'd have spec releases done after that, and we can point to the spec release for the DevNet. Timeline, at least in my head, is roughly 2-ish weeks, unless that seems unrealistic.
Thank you. Yeah, any of the client teams want to chime in on some of the issues we've seen on the 3 or yeah, otherwise it feels like it was pretty clear. And yeah, so there are a couple, I think open PRs that people want to discuss on the call, so we can cover those as well. I guess so we covered the big Q test. One other thing I think it's important as we head to Devnet 4 is the BLS 12381 repricings. I don't know if all the teams have had time to run the benchmarks, and if someone's like looked into the results of that. But if we are to change the gas prices, we should try and do it by the next Devnet 2.
So just speaking from benchmarking Geth, I would personally say that increasing the cost 20% across the board would be the most aggressive that I could see the gas model still being not heavily underpriced. So right now that's what I would opt for.
From the Besu side, we've been doing a lot of benchmarking with different library options, and it's a little bit difficult for us because a lot of the kind of gas targets are based off of kind of a relative performance of EC recover, and that's one of the precompiles we've identified that we need to optimize. So I think something that's going to help us with giving a flat target for gas pricing is an agreed upon machine metric that we want to perform a specific megagas per second for the BLS precompiles, specifically the MSM precompiles. Just initial benchmarking seems to agree that it is underpriced on what seems to be somewhat agreed upon hardware, like using a Gen 11 NUC and like an M1 ARM machine. It seems to be that our initial benchmarking agrees with Geth that it is underpriced, but getting a specific target is, I think it's going to be better to have a specific machine target and megagas per second rather than kind of a relative performance metric for us.
Thanks. Anyone from Wrath, Theragon, or Nethermind?
Yeah, for Nethermind, I think it was Jared from Geth proposed potentially doubling the discount costs, and based on our initial test with the state tests, we would support that because the MSM, particularly the G1 MSM precompile, seems maybe underpriced, but we're seeing quite high variance between tests. So yeah, we need to look into this further, and we're going to test out with our own benchmarking framework to verify the accuracy of the state test benchmarks.
Thanks. Anyone from Aragon or Wrath had time to look into this?
Yeah, we are at a team offsite, so kind of we've been busy with that. But for us, the results should be very close to those of Geth because we use the same library and pretty much the same implementation.
Okay. And on the red side?
We did not have time to look at it, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I guess maybe one thing we could do to move this forward, especially if we wanted for DevNet 4 and that we expect to ship DevNet 4 in like 2 weeks, is it seems like everyone agrees that these calls are underpriced, and at least Nethermind agrees that the original proposal of doubling is probably directionally right. So Jared, would you be open to just could you open a PR against the EIP, effectively proposing the doubling of the chain of the gas costs, and then we can? Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, continue.
I was going to say, if you can open the PR, this way we can track it as part of the DevNet 4 spec, and then by next week even though it's the CL call, if we've had time to make tests on like more standardized hardware, and also get some numbers potentially from REST, we can determine whether like those values are correct. But yeah, assuming that this is all like the information we get, then we can just move forward with the first proposed repricing.
Yeah, sure, that sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on the BLS repricing? Okay, and then let's discuss this. Actually, so there's a question in the chat about what's the hardware that we recommend. I don't know, Jared, do you have thoughts on this?
Not really, no. I know for several proposals in the past, we've just, I mean, the Mode XP repricing comes to mind. We've used EC Recover as a base, but I get that that's not, that some people are against that. Yeah. But no, I don't like have a, I can't, I don't have an opinion on what the specific hardware should be for a target right now.
I think Merrick had made a recommendation, or like kind of concurrence, a recommendation of like an Intel NUC 11 as a baseline with a 50 megagas per second target, 32 pairs. I think that would be like coming up with that as a standard would be pretty reasonable.
Anyone?
We're also seeing a lot of difference
disagree with
between
that?
architecture.
So where did why are we using on that? What's the rationale for that?
For the NUC as rationale, I think that's just a common solo staking rig as a baseline. I don't think that there's going to be many validator nodes out there that are running any on hardware lesser than that.
Okay, and there's some discussion in the chat about the version number, and we should probably test multiple architectures. So I guess maybe if teams have the capacity to test it against different architectures, and at least like report those tests, that would be good. I think the more data we can get, the better. But if we can prioritize this in the next week or so, that'd be really good, so that we could actually make a call for Devnet 4 and not be changing the gas prices forever. And I'll let people continue to debate in the chat exactly which NUC version to target. Anything else on the repricings? Okay. Okay. Next up, something that actually, Mikhail, is this something you wanted to be considered for Devnet 4? Your PR about making the execution requests a sidecar?
Yeah, probably for Devnet 4, but generally to gather the feedback. And if we want this this design, so we need to do some more work on the EIPs and smart contracts.
Okay.
And actually, ideally, if we want this kind of design, we would like to have it for Devnet 4 if possible. So the I can briefly go over the proposed change.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So this is a slight or not. It's just an improvement upon the ideas that already were proposed previously by Felix, like client, and some others. Okay, so what this PR is doing actually is it proposes the design of the requests that will be as less impactful for EL, and which allows to add new type of requests as smooth as possible. So what exactly proposed is the first step is to remove the requests from execution layer beacon flow body, and entirely serve these requests as a sidecar. So we had this idea before, but now it makes more sense because CL keeps those requests aside of the payload in the beginning block. And for one of the concerns of this approach was the optimistic sync safety. And to keep optimistic sync safe, we will need to keep the request tag, the commit to the list of requests in the EL block header. So which is fine, which is perfectly fine. The other part of this PR emerged in the discussion with Lucas. So we want to encode those requests in a way that EL will not need to parse them at all. So the proposal is actually to for the system smart contracts to return the list of requests in a way that they are ready to be served to the CL. So it's just basically the modification that is required to achieve this goal is to prepend the type byte before each request entry and do this in the smart contract implementation. So this is doable, and I think it's not difficult to have this implemented. So then the EL gets these request lists from each of the smart contracts, concatenates them instead of using RLP, it just concatenates them in a list. This was proposed by Felix in the Unify Request Objects PR to the Engine API to use this encoding. And this unified request list is used in two places. First, it is used in the Engine API to surface the request to CL as is. And the other part is that this exact list is used to compute this request hash commitment, which is put into the EL block header. And that's basically it. So adding a new request type would be a matter of implementing the smart contract and just saying that this is a new request type to EL, and EL can handle it by some generic code. So that's about it. The design, looks quite good to my opinion, and yeah, that's it. And it would be great to get a feedback from EL devs, and yeah, whether it sounds or how does it sound to everyone, and from CL as well. So CL will need to parse those requests from this kind of encoding, and yeah. So that's it. Please take a look, and if we decide to go, as I said, we need to change the system smart contract. We need to update this 7685 EAP, which is the generic request type. So that's kind of like the changes that are not done by this PR and just announced there. I'm happy to do this. Yeah, cool, Felix. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry if Felix, like client, want to elaborate on this, or just provide your comments. Please go ahead.
So I think it's a great one. I'm the proposer because it means that we have to care even less about the request. In my previous proposal, we still had to know about the output size of the contract objects in order to be able to split it into a list. So this is now also removed from the EL. Basically, it's just even less knowledge about the contracts. Yeah, like you mentioned in the PR, the deposit contract is a special one, but it's also kind of the OG system contract. So I guess it's fine if we have to handle it a bit special as the only exception for now. And yeah, so I think my big question would just be like if it has really been determined that it's fully safe for the sync, because yeah, with this design, I mean, basically the idea behind this design was also a little bit to make it so that we handle the requests in a similar way to how the receipts are actually handled. So the main motivation here is also that within the Ethereum block body, like within the EL block body, we do not actually have the receipts. because the receipts are an output of the block computation, and so the receipts the receipts are a separate entity, and then so however but we do have the receipts root, and this is similar here. So the requests have the request root within the block body. So I'm a bit curious how it's going to work during the sync, if we will have to somehow sync the requests as a separate object, or if they are fully, like, if it's totally possible to just not have the requests at all within the EL after the sync. So technically we don't need them. They are only for the CL, so I guess it would be fine not to sync. Like during the snap sync, for example, we would not sync the requests, and therefore we would not be able to validate the request root. However, for the blocks which are provided by the CL, we would be able to verify the request root.
Yeah, so basically this request hash it has to, yeah, will be used in two places, in two validations. First is the block hash validation. So the CL gives EL the receipts. The EL computes the receipts hash. So the computation is encapsulated in EL. How it's done, it's completely up to EL in this, according to this proposal. And then the obtained receipts, request hash will be used to compute the block hash and validate the block hash. So if the requests passed from CL are not the one that the EL is committed to, the block hash validation will fail. The other part is the other validation happens upon the block execution. So the requests obtained from the block execution will also need to be validated against this block commitment. And if the block execution gives you something different than that the block is committed to, so the execution of the block will fail. And these two validations actually makes us safe during the optimistic sync, where EL runs blocks on its own, and it can validate the requests obtained from the execution against the request hash. And the same is done by CL, right? So the commitment is validated from both sides. So that's it. That's how it should work. And SnapSync, of course, no, there is no kind of like these checks, and yeah, it's fine.
So there's no need to download them during the SnapSync. We basically just don't have to have the request at all for the
Yeah.
Okay, that's very
exactly.
Good. Yeah, I think
so
the big question.
Yeah, Potus.
Yeah, Potus.
Michel, you're proposing, so this request, the sidecars are going to be gossiped on the CL side, and you're proposing this for the next Devnet?
No. There's no gossiping of requests. So the thing is that the requests are purely created when the block is executed. It's just a mechanism for the basically every node computes the request on their own, because the only way in which requests can be generated is via transactions. So in fact, we are already gossiping the requests in a certain way. They are just encoded within the transactions.
Oh, I see. But then how will the CL get the request? Is this going to be on notify new payload?
Yeah, basically CL will get it as an output from the EL. Yeah.
CL will get it on the get payload, but separately to the payload. This is why it is called a sidecar.
No, okay, so I'm still lost. So how will the CL sync a block over gossip? When I get the block over gossip, will I have this request immediately, or would I only get transactions, send it to the EL, and then from there get back the requests?
No, but you will get those requests as a part of the beacon block.
Oh, so the proposer will pack requests on the body as it is now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The main problem that we are trying to address is that in the previous, like another problem we're trying to address in the previous design is that the requests are duplicated. So in the previous design, before the PR from Mikhail, the big problem was we had the requests in the EL block body, and we also had them in the CL block body. And I mean, technically, it doesn't really matter because they can somehow be discarded or something, but it's just kind of a messy thing to have the same object with like slightly different semantics in the two blocks. And so with this new proposal, they are only in one place, which is the CL block body, and that's kind of where they have to be as well.
Okay, and this will be constructed on get payload. It's going to come back from the engine.
Yes.
As separated from the payload, but
yeah.
Okay, perfect.
It's
this is
actually
exactly
same
what
as
we're
now.
doing in PBS. Okay, this is exactly as in EPBS, so this is good. I like this.
Okay. So it's like the ultimate requests design. Like there's no better one.
And this is something we want for the next DevNet, or are we waiting for a few more weeks for people to comment on it before we ship it on a DevNet?
I mean, I don't really know how
people like it in the chat. I guess, does anyone have an objection to bringing this in for the next DevNet? Because if everyone is happy with it, then yeah, we should make the decision right now, and this way we can update the specs, update the contracts, update testing. But yeah, does anyone have any concerns or objections with this?
There might be some objections from CL, but I'm not sure. I mean that, yeah, they have to do more work, which is fair because TL is the consumer. I mean, like, have to do more work by just decoding this. But
wait, what's the extra work here? I thought that on get payload we're gonna get these requests. We're gonna just import them locally. What's the extra work?
Yeah, previously there were some discussion in the PR about like encoding, particularly of the requests, so that the CL has to parse some encoding that is not generic. Like it's not entirely it's SSZ, but it requires unions. This kind of discussion.
Yeah, so that I think we have already like relented and accepted that we can do the parsing as long as there's a commitment of not using unions then in SSZ.
Yeah, so this is one of the things in Mikhail's proposal that is going to be really interesting, because now the requests are just going to be provided as a single byte array, and that has to be parsed by the CL. And I mean, it is. Let me just put it right. I think it's okay, but it's a custom format. So what we're talking about is basically it's like a byte array where you have these type containers and you have to keep checking for the first byte. Then you will know the size of the next object based on this type byte, and then you can basically take it out of the list. I think it's a great design. Honestly, it totally works, and it's the simplest possible way to send this information, but it definitely requires more parsing on the CL side than it ever did before.
And just one more clarification, this would supersede Light Client's PR to unified request objects as well as your PR to unified list of opaque requests, right? So instead of doing those two, we would just do Mikhail's PR.
Yes, because in Mikhail's PR, it's like it changes the same thing again to make it even simpler, basically.
Thanks.
And to be clear, the PR that's superseded is this one I'm putting in the chat, right? So this one we would just close.
Oh, this one will need some, I don't know, maybe some changes.
Okay.
But yeah, we need something,
Okay.
Oh, the EIP, yeah, we need to update.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, we need to update.
It's kind of confusing because it's across all of the repos. So we have the engine API and the EIPs and the system contracts, and they all need changes in some way.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess it seems like everyone is in favor of moving towards this. There's no objections. It would be great if by next week's call we could have like the final set of PRs. I mean, ideally merged, but if if not merged, at least like a clean set of final PRs across every single EIP that and the engine API and whatnot that people can review. But yeah, hopefully we can do this async in the next week or so. I don't. Yeah, Felix, Mikhail, can either of you take this on?
I've left a note in the spec doc as needs updates for, I think there's 3 EIPs that would need updates, right? There's the MaxDB change request to flat encoding, deposits, and withdrawals.
Yeah.
And then I think there's one more. Change request hash, flat hash.
Yeah, we need to. Yeah, so the flat hash. I'm not actually. What is the commitment? Can you? Sorry for dragging this out, but Mikhail, what is the commitment? Is it the flat hash commitment, or is it the? No, it's yeah. It has to be, right, because it's just it's literally a hash of the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's fine by me. Okay. Yeah. So that one. So this flat hash thing then has to be changed a little bit to just basically specify that it's the hash over, like the request hash is the hash over this output, and yeah. Anyway, we will get this done.
Okay.
I will implement it in the contracts, and yeah.
Awesome. Oliver?
I seem to recall that right now we're gossiping the requests over P2P in the block bodies. Should we remove this in this case?
Sorry, what do you mean? So it's in the block body, in the beacon block body. It still remains there, but not. It's removed from the execution layer block body.
Okay. Yeah. That was it.
Okay. Well, thanks, Felix. Thanks, Mikhail. Anything else on this? Okay. And then next up, so Devnet 4, want to make sure that we cover all the other open questions. So, okay, so there was the PR 261110, but this we need to change. Then there were 2 PRs to 7702, not allowing authorization non-equals to 2 to the 64 minus 1, and then adding a bunch of clarifications to align the spec with the tests. Yeah, does anyone have context on these or want to chat about them? Let me post them in the chat here. Yeah, and it seems there was some conversation on the PR right before the call. Okay, if no one wants to discuss it, we can move on. But people should ideally review this as we finalize the scope for Devnet 4. Anything else that people feel is kind of urgent to discuss for Devnet 4 and that we should get sorted out in the next week or so?
Yeah, I think the builder spec PR should get some last looks and get merged in so that people can start working on it.
Okay. Do you mind sharing it in the chat if you have it handy?
Yeah, just it.
Thank you. Anything else on Devnet 4 that we should be looking into before next week? Okay. Otherwise, yeah, so the 2 main things are Mikhail's PR, which Felix and him will follow up on, and then all of the BLS repricings. So hopefully we get some agreement around benchmarks, but we'll at least have a PR open to change the gas costs by a factor of 2, like we originally discussed, and then a bunch of other things that have been flagged in the Devnet 4 spec already. Anything else? Okay, and if not, yeah, one quick thing as well. I'll give a shout for is we've put up an RFP to audit all of the contracts in Pectra. So we have this open now. It'll be open until October 11th. Hopefully by then the code is pretty much finalized, but we hope to get a bunch of different people looking at the contract and both fuzzing them, doing some static analysis and more. I'll post the link in the chat, but if you are interested in listening, you can find us on the Ethereum/request for proposals repo. And I think that covers everything around implementations. Anything else before we move on to the fork split? Okay. So fork split. So on last week's call, it seems like we had rough agreement on at least the first half of Pectra. So moving from what Devnet 3 was into production. A bunch of teams shared some thoughts this week. So Aragon was like slightly opposed to the idea of splitting the fork, partially because one, it would just like grow the second half of things and potentially deprioritize Vercol. I think Prism was in favor of a fork keeping DevNet 3 as the first half of Pectra, but then also opening the door for more changes in the second half, including potentially the EPBS EIP. And one thing they were explicit about is not raising the blob count in the first half. Lodestar wants to basically keep first half as DevNet 3 as well, and then basically has some proposals for the second half, some of which are not already included. Nethermind feels strongly about keeping the scope as is if we do the split, but is also fine with keeping the fork in one piece. And then Vitalik has a proposal to actually add something to the first half, which is a blob increase and a 7623 to bound the block size. And then Reth supports freezing both halves as is. So yeah, there's a lot here. I guess one place to start is maybe on the first half. So it seems like there's a lot of support for freezing the first half of the fork, and that's roughly where we landed last call. But then, yeah, I think Vitalik and sorry, I forget who was the other one who wanted something else in the first half. I think Vitalik might have been the only one who wants something added to the first half, aside from the base people who came on to argue for the blob increase last week. But yeah, maybe let's start here. If you're on the call, Vitalik, do you want to give the?
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
here.
Okay.
Again, I think basically a blob count increase, I think, is something, or a blob target increase is something that will be extremely valuable. And to me, the key stat basically is that if you look at the level of usage right now of blobs, it's like basically somewhere around 75% of the target. And I think it's important to keep in mind basically that one big difference between the blob market and the like regular EVM market is that the blob market is made up of a much smaller number of larger actors. And so even though it feels like a nice and constant 75%, like I think it is undoubtedly true that there are layer twos that are would have used blobs if more space is available, but are making the decision not to, precisely because they know that if they come in, then they themselves are going to be enough to make blobs be no longer cheap for both themselves and for everyone else. So I think it's really important to think about like some of those long-term effects, and generally the facts that the Ethereum ecosystem really has turned a corner to the point where layer twos, including blob-based layer twos, actually can offer people a like sub 1 cent transaction fees. And this is momentum that is extremely important to build on. And generally, the ecosystem needs to scale. It is scaling and needs to scale, and wants to see assurance that it actually can scale. And this is something where that the layer one is committed to going along with them on. And so my so one so this is this to me is an argument for increasing the blob target. So the reason why I suggested EIP 7623 along this is because a lot of people's concerns around a blob target increase have to do with worst case situations. And currently, the worst case block size is about 2.7 megabytes, which is using call data. And EIP 7623 basically knocks that down to roughly 1 megabyte. And so if we do a blob 7623 and simultaneously a blob target increase, so even some like 2x is, which is actually more than I advocated, would still reduce the theoretical maximum block size by a factor of about a third. So yeah, I basically view 7623 as something which adds a really valuable safety feature. Another and so that's one of the other suggestions. And then another question is basically, are there other ways to mitigate the issue involving the problem with like worst cases? And I think there's two other options, right? One of them is to basically do the EIP that increases the minimum blob base fee, which basically means that if we ever enter a fee market condition, discovery condition, then the period of full blocks would be about 3 times shorter than otherwise would be. So that's one option. And then another option is actually to abandon the idea that there has to be a 2x divergence between target and max, and basically say, either increase the target to 4 without increasing the max, or increase the target to 4 or 5, but increase the max to 7 or 8, for example. I mean, or I guess more aggressively, Ansgar suggests a 6-9, right? Yes, thank you both. This EIP 7762 is the one that I had in mind there. So that would have the practical effects that if we have if we enter a one of these like blob price discovery periods, then it would like cut the maximum possible length of a period of maximum usage by a factor of about 2/3. So I think I mean the reason why we need to think about this is because like if you just look realistically, to me it's just clear that like just scaling actual usage is just incredibly important. And if Ethereum does not offer this, then like people will find it elsewhere, and people are going to have like insecure blockchain experiences that are just not on Ethereum, right? And and I would even argue that like even a 33% blob increase is probably more valuable than like even 3 of the Pectra EIPs at this point. So if you just like look at the ratio of effort to value, just like the amount of actual value here is quite high in terms of increasing the amount of activity that can happen. And so I think there's a lot of value in doing a like target increase, and at the same time as thinking through like adding like 7623 in order to try to mitigate the effect of this and allow some of the other increases to be higher.
Okay, thanks for sharing. There's been a lot of conversation in the chat. So I think there's definitely one thread that the Prism team raised last week as well around just like measuring the impact of this. Another thread is that basically the idea that if we do increase the blob count and we want 7623 and we maybe want the fee market replacement and we maybe want 7742, now we're like at a 4 EIP fork effectively. That's like starting to be its own thing. But yeah, I guess maybe the strongest opposition seems to be from POTUS around like just the measurements of this. So maybe POTUS, you want to share your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm just worried that even increasing the target but keeping the limit, which seems like reasonable and safe, but we have not gotten any data about this. We haven't seen a single study that says how much it takes for nodes to actually be syncing, recovering from a long reorg. I mean, those are the things that will change because it's not bandwidth on the happy case, but bandwidth when you actually need to sync several blocks at a time. And it would be nice to see if this is actually safe. The measurements that we've seen are based on average bandwidth, which is certainly not what you need at the tip. It'd be good to see a serious study that proves that this is safe, and then we'll support it. But without data, it seems that we're just changing numbers because we just came up with these numbers out of our head.
Yeah, I mean, I'd argue that honestly, we have had the study, and the study is reworking like increasingly fine for 9 months of operation. Like a 33% increases within range of like gas limit increases that we've done many times on chain. And I think we also just like have to take the like also take seriously the other side of the argument, right? Which is basically all of the risks that come from like blob gas prices going up to 10 and 100 way again. Like we actually have to balance those considerations at some point.
Marius?
Yeah, but it's not really a 33% increase. It's more like a 66% increase because you're not like when we increase the blob limit, we're not only increasing the limit on the consensus layer, but we're also increasing the average number of transactions or blob transactions that are sent to the network on the execution layer in the transaction pool.
Right, but that's still a 33% increase on the total load, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
that's true. Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess, yeah, I'd maybe be curious to hear if like other teams share kind of Prism's view around the like measurement issues, like, or do other teams, assuming like for a second, like that we didn't have all the other Pectra scope issues, like, is like, yeah, do people generally want to see more measurement on this, or like, yeah, how do we feel about increasing the block capacity? Enrico?
Yeah, we just want to share that we had some discussion internally about this, and for instance, just a data point, a couple of days ago, a guy showed up in our Discord saying that he missed the block, and it was a homestaker that falled back building locally, and he had to his local EL selected 6 blobs, and then he ended up being reorged. The block has been reached the network fine, but then the blobs was not able to reach on time and has been reorged. And then, this is a home staker and it has not very big upload bandwidths, but still something that is concerning some of the long tail of home staker that doesn't have enough bandwidth. And so I think that the target increase to 4 is kind of reasonable, but I also think that some of the home staker could have been impact also now, and what could be something like having a parameter on the execution layer for these guys that says, please, if we are about to propose a block, please don't kind of limit the number of blobs that the local EL will select, just to accommodate their potential upload bandwidth in that case. It could be an option that could be abused for sure. Yeah, thinking I'm just putting my foot in this, and in his yeah, my just asking if that could make sense, something like that, to go in the direction of helping those situations.
Thanks. We have Francis and then Ansgar.
Thanks, guys. I just want to mention one thing. Like, we are always talking about home stakers with like low bandwidth cannot sync like properly, but we haven't actually defined a minimum requirement about home stakers bandwidth like limit. Like, are we going to say that if they have only 1 megabyte per second upload link, and we are gonna tolerate that like forever? I guess like what I'm trying to say is that we probably need a better measurement or like better minimum spec for the network requirement, so that we can talk about things like in more concrete manners, like not kind of like in like people's like reports about, okay, I have issues, but I don't know what your bandwidth and I don't know what your like spec, etc.
Yeah, like I think this would be good. Like we clearly don't have this today, and like if I were doing it, what I'd suggest is something like you look at around the world what is like some median amount of bandwidth that you can get across different countries, and what's like the share of countries that you want to cover with Ethereum. But yeah, I doubt we're gonna get this today.
Actually, like one quick information about that, I actually did a like kind of like quick search. So according to like those speed testing sites, the medium is about like 60 or 70 megabytes per second upload link. And like for the like maybe long tail of things, like for the 200th country, it's around like 3 to 4 megabytes per second upload link. So depends on like how we are thinking about like thinking in terms of like max like burst speed that is needed for blob propagation. It seems kind of like reasonable, like within that range, but we definitely need like more concrete analysis of that.
Thanks. Yeah, Ansgar.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly say, so my proposal for what to do today would be that we ideally agree on at least a target increase to 4. I think the case for that, I mean, I said there's a little bit of pushback there on the call today as well, but I think we have relatively broad agreement on that. And specifically going from 3 to 4 a year later, right? We shipped for 4 at the beginning of this year. We'll ship PLS at the beginning of next year. I think the average global bandwidth increases by like 30% every year anyway. So like that's basically just keeping step with that. And given how strategically important it is, I think that would be a good baseline to agree on. And then maybe we just delay the decision on whether we go beyond that with also max increase on collecting some additional data first. I think I personally would prefer to also do that then later on, but I see that there's a bit more resistance there. So maybe postpone that decision and just agree on the as a minimum, basically, that we will increase the target to 4. That I think would be very productive to do too.
Yeah, I guess I'd be curious if this is something that there is broad agreement on. And then, if again trying to keep the scope of Pectra tight, like if this is something there is agreement on, like is this the one thing we would change in Pectra if we could only change? And then there are some concerns around the home stakers, and I don't know how we resolve those. But yeah, maybe I guess maybe one question is like if yeah, what would we want to know to like be confident that we could do this increase? Yeah, I don't know if like anyone has some concerns around just like the current stakers, like what's the data that we'd want to see to be confident with this?
I mean, isn't there already a lot of data from home stakers saying the current load is too high?
Is that anecdotal data from folks that are bandwidth constrained, though? I mean, we're only going to hear from the squeaky wheels.
I'm just saying that we are already at capacity for some people, and increasing the target is going to put more people at capacity and beyond. So like, I don't really know what data we can provide, since there's already data saying that we're kicking people off the network or making it difficult for them to do their duties as a home validator.
And then there's a comment in the chat around rolling out I don't want at the prod, and that this will help with bandwidth. But yeah, I don't know if anyone has more context on that they want to share, like with the timeline. Yeah. Okay, Perry saying this would take months to roll out and analyze. Yeah.
I mean, is it crazy to have a fork after what's already specified for Devnet 3 that's focused just on increasing the blob throughput and doing the preparations for PeerDOS? Like, to me, that de-risks the situation of just making the current fork take even longer, gives us more time to roll out these improvements for the CL networking, gives us some time to improve the bandwidth consumption of the EL transaction pool for blobs, and still keeps us from getting into a situation where we bundle it with the full PeerDOS and EOF or whatever else is in the next hard fork that could take another 1.5 years.
Yeah, I guess it's worth having that conversation. I just want to make sure also we don't forget the hands that were already up. So like POTUS, let's do POTUS, Ben, and Perry, and then come back to this. Yeah.
Yeah, so just a quick comment, a couple of quick comments. I kind of feel that there's a double standard here in that the data that we have that our users are complaining about being reorged and losing blocks is anecdotal. But then on the other hand, the data that we have that the nodes are safe with an increase, it's also mostly anecdotal. We don't have good metrics. And I would like these two set of data to be put up to the same standards. And second, it seems to me that this change is just very minor. So it's easy to implement. It's just as much as when we were talking about like changing the issuance curve, which was a one-liner. It's this kind of things that we can actually measure. We can take some time to measure, and if we decide that it is safe, this is shipped in less than a day. So I don't see why we need to agree today on an increase when we have a lot of time to measure and make this change in less than just a few minutes on every client.
Thanks. Yeah, Ben.
Following up on light clients, maybe three forks. Just a comment that EOF could go in that second one probably. But I just wanted to say, with any increase in target blob limit, we should probably seriously consider 7762, which is the min fee, just so that the fee market isn't unpredictable. And there's been a researcher study on that, and base supports it, for instance.
Thanks.
And again, it's a one-line change.
Let's do, yeah, Perry, Max, and Tony.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with what Potus is saying. I don't necessarily think we have to agree today, but we have to agree that we intend to do this so we can collect the data required. I do think clients are anyway implementing I don't want messages. There's going to be a reduction there. And we can analyze the reduction as well as figure out, for example, reorg rates for home stakers. We mostly know what validator indexes comply to home staker IP addresses. And we can check the reorg rate for that and see how bad it is right now. So then we eliminate the anecdotal part and we actually have raw facts in front of us, and then we can make a decision based on that. I guess the commitment now is then to figure out that is this stuff we want to spend time analyzing and doing, or is something else higher priority?
Thanks, Zoo, Max, and then Tony.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the data point, I do respect the desire for data-driven decision-making, and I think we already have a lot of data on this because of the fact that the fee market is sort of broken. We know that we've had periods of sustained, high percentage of the gas or of the blob limit used. So we've had 6 blobs used for a long time, and we can use that data to support a move, which what Ansgar suggested would be 4-6, which is the same limit. And we've already had periods where we're operating near the limit for a long period of time. So I think we can go look at that data and make a decision based on that. I also think we should consider doing 7762 as others have mentioned, because much of the disagreement about that was basically, oh, we're going to reach capacity soon and then this isn't going to matter. But of course, now we're increasing capacity again. We should expect to see more periods of price discovery happening.
Tony?
Yeah, I've just published some analysis on the reorg rate, a very recent analysis, how the whole situation played out, and it looked like since we shipped 4844, the reorg rate is basically trending down. So we are at a level that is way better where we were, let's say, a year ago, for example. And especially interesting is the fact that blocks with 6 blobs are not way more often, are not significantly more often reorged than, for example, a block with 3 blobs or even 1 blob. So I think it's very hard nowadays to really attribute the fact of being reorged to the number of blobs. I think there are many more variables, like the slot index in an epoch, the fact if the previous proposer is playing timing games, and so on, that have a way bigger impact on the reorg rate nowadays than the number of blobs. So I would say it looks like the network is definitely ready to have more blobs. I would be more concerned about the maximum EL payload size than the block size, just because it can be so variable compared to blobs that are just a constant size increase. Just if you haven't seen it, I will also post the most recent analysis that I just did today in the chat. And I think it's a good idea, like Perry said, to make it more granular, to look into what are solo stakers doing, and also split between MEF boost users and non-MEF boost users, because I think even that has a way bigger impact on the reorg rate than the number of blobs nowadays.
Thank you. Ahmad?
Yeah, just wanted to agree with the last 2 points Tony said about solo stakers and MEF boost and no MEF boost, because trending down reorgs does not mean that solo stakers are not struggling. It just means that big operators are finding better ways to optimize against being reorged and like adjusting their timings of posting the blocks, adjusting their timings to be exactly profitable and at the same time not get reorged out. So yeah, I think that's mostly it, not that Dencun suddenly fixed reorging. But yeah.
Thanks. Enrico?
Yeah, it's exactly the same things from Ahmed. I do think that the improvement is just infrastructure optimization rather than clients being more optimized for sort of saying. Actually, what my example before was actually an example specifically for an home staker that fall back to local product local build. And if he had not fallen back and choose the builder, he probably wouldn't haven't been reorged out. So it's just be more resilient to maintain local building instead of just systematically give block production away.
Okay, I guess trying to summarize all of this, and then the past couple calls we spent discussing scoping, like I think it's pretty clear that there's like a strong bias towards keeping the first half of Pectra as close to Devnet 3 as possible, and then there's like some desire to maybe increase capacity in this fork with a lot of caveats. And the work for that could be relatively small, but obviously not trivial. I think the 4 EIPs that sort of are being discussed around this are 7623, so capping the call data, 7742, the assigning the blob count only to the CL, potentially 7762 with the fee, the minimum fee repricing, and then there's no EIP for the blob count change, but something around that. And then it seems also clear that like for the second half of Pectra, we have these two huge things, Pectra, or PeerDAS, and EOF that are in progress, that are not stable yet. Like neither of their individual devnets are stable, and we haven't even tried to put a devnet with the two together. So there's still a lot of work there. And as much as people say that we would want to keep the spec frozen there, it seems unrealistic that like nothing will come out in the next 6 months that we decide to include. So I think one way to move forward is we keep the scope of Pectra A as Devnet 3. We keep these blob EIPs, these 4 EIPs I just mentioned, modulo the one that doesn't exist yet, to actually increase the blob count as CFI'd for Pectra A. In the next few weeks / months, depending on how long it takes, we actually run the numbers on staking. And I think there's a broader conversation to have around that, like what numbers do we actually want? What does it look like? And then try to like build the confidence around whether we think this is the right time to do it or not. If it turns out that we're all happy with the numbers, then we just include these relatively small changes alongside Pectra A, and we shouldn't delay things too much, and we get some increase in capacity. If we're unhappy with the numbers, we can debate what to do then. And then for Pectra B, which I think we should just accept is effectively Fusaka at this point, which is the next fork, we have EOF and PeerDAS, which we've already included in Pectra A, be the main things, and we can CFI as much stuff as we want. But I think having the commitment be that we don't include new things until we're actually ready to implement them is probably the best gate, because once we have EOF and PeerDAS relatively stable, then we'll have a big list of things that everyone thinks is extremely important, and we can debate what to include from that. But at least we're not gradually adding more things as we haven't actually implemented EOF and PeerDAS. And I think in the world where like 763 and all the blob stuff doesn't make it to Pectra A, we can decide to either move it to Pectra B, or if we feel that it's so urgent, it needs its own fork in the middle, we can have that conversation. But that feels like the most practical way forward. Yeah, and as much as I would like to like close the scope and say that we're going to commit to these things and not add anything else, I think it's just like an unrealistic thing to commit to. But I think we can commit to not making decisions about inclusions until we're actually ready to write more code. And this maximizes how long we have to actually think about different proposals. And can we commit to some subset of Pectra B that would not move out? So I would say yes. I would say EOF and PeerDAS, which are already included. So like my proposal is that Pectra B is EOF and pure DAS, and we don't add anything else until both those two things work on DevNets, and we feel confident that we can actually add a bunch of other EIPs. And I don't think that like we can make a decision today around whether we want some small blob increase fork in between Pectra A and Pectra B. I think if the situation changes a lot, we'll be able to make that call. It's relatively trivial to implement this like set of blob EIPs, but we, I don't know that this is like something we should commit to today. But at least we get a scope for Pectra A that's relatively finalized. It's pretty clear that we prioritize looking into the blob increase, and then we keep EOF and pure DAS as the focus for Pectra B, and we don't do anything else into that fork until those two are done. But it's possible we add more stuff, like Prism was talking about 7732, for example, and stuff like that. But we can have that discussion when we actually have EOF and pure DAS implemented. Any strong objections? And yeah, we call this Fusaka. Yes, thanks, Trent. So like what I would do practically if we agree to this is I'll update the Pectra meta EIP. I'll remove EOF and pure DAS, move those as included for Fusaka. I'll remove anything else that was CFI'd for Pectra except 7623 and 7742. I think we should add the max fee, the min fee for the blobs increase. We don't have a PR yet for the actual blob increase, but we can add that when it's there. And then if anything else was CFI'd for Fusaka or Pectra, we just move that there. And the only two things included in Fusaka would be EOF and pure DAS for now. Okay. Any objections? Yeah, Guillaume.
Not an objection per se, just clarification. What happens to whatever? Well, the only thing that was CFI'd for Fusaka so far.
Right, Verco. So I think like we can leave it in the Fusaka. We can leave it as CFI'd for Fusaka. Realistically, we're not going to do this all in the same fork. If we want to open another, if we want to open another meta EIP today for Amsterdam, like I can do that too. I think at this point, I would almost wait until we're like farther along with Fusaka to open the Amsterdam EIP. But so, Verco should stay CFI. I mean, I'm happy to open an Amsterdam meta EIP as well to like have it be clear.
Yeah, as you want. Just
okay. Yeah, I think that's
just
right.
don't drop it.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. And I'll try. I don't know if the EIP bot will let me do this, but I'll try and do this all in a single PR so that it's all kind of clear in one place. But I'll see if the EIP bot is lets me push this through. Okay. Anything else on the fork scope? And there was a comment in the chat around from Barnabas around like implementation estimates for the 4 blob EIPs. So I think, in the next couple of weeks, it would be good to like think through both the data we want to see, but also the overhead of implementing these, and we can make a call about the inclusion once we know a bit better. But I think for everyone who's like in favor of pushing this, we should now's the time to collect data and then also try to like look into reasons why this could be an issue. Okay. Anything else on Pectra?
Has anyone implemented 7742 on the EL side by any chance? Because then we can already start doing some basic tests and seeing if we can start increasing the blob easily just from the CL side. But we would need at least one EL team to do this. One EL and one CL team to do this.
I would hold off on that at least for now, purely because there's enough changes for Devnet 4. Maybe we can coordinate on this after, and by then we should have some more analysis data.
Thanks. And I know Max, you came on today as well because you wanted to share some updates about 7762. I'm surprised we have the time to actually go into this, but seems like we do. So yeah, do you want to give some updates on the conversation that happened on about the EIP over the past couple of weeks?
Yeah, I would just like to plug a few things from Data Always. Basically gave a very thorough database investigation of what this would mean for prices. And I think the maximum increase this would cause to the average price per blob for the rollups was, I believe, 16% for base, going from like an average of 6 cents to an average of 7 blob. We go very cheap. And then also some of the rollups have expressed support for this, whereas they would be the ones that are kind of potentially by them, including base, express strong support for the proposal. So I added those to the ETH Magicians thread if anybody's interested in taking a look at those. Sorry, the ETH Magicians thread.
Thank you. And I just posted that data always analysis in the chat as well. Anything else people want to chat about before we wrap up? Okay. Well, oh yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Well, so, what is the target for Pectra at this point?
So Devnet 3, we CFI'd these 4 blob-related EIPs, or 3 EIPs that exist, and then this hypothetical blob increase. We investigate all the blob stuff in the next few weeks. If Pectra without that is ready to ship, before that's decided, then we ship this. At that point, we can have a conversation around whether we want a special small blob fork in between. For Pectra B, which we'll call Fusaka, we have EOF and PeerDAS included. We implement those. We don't add anything else until those 2 are implemented. We CFI a bunch of stuff in the coming months as it comes up. And then when we have a stable DevNet running both PeerDAS and EOF, then we decide what, if anything, we want to include alongside those in the fork. And then we also draft the meta EIP for Amsterdam to highlight that Verkle is CFI'd for it.
Yeah, I think I'm asking more about when are we trying to have a frozen spec for Pectra? And do we have a target that we're working for right now? Because there's been some things thrown around, even like forking early next year, and to do that, working backwards, it kind of means that we really need things frozen in November, and we need to start thinking about doing test nets in December.
So I think based on
1 month away almost.
Based on like the discussions we had around DevNet 4 today, it seems we need at least a couple weeks for DevNet 4 to go live. I think it would be ideal if by next ACD we are launching DevNet 4, we should figure out whether this is the last DevNet we want to launch for Pectra or not. And this includes, do we want to include all the blob stuff?
I'm pretty certain that we will have another DevNet after DevNet 4.
Okay. Yeah. So this gives us, I think this gives us roughly like a month to make the final decision around all the blob stuff. And then in parallel to this, once we have the DevNet 4, find some bugs, fix them, we start getting towards a spec freeze. And I think how quickly we can freeze the specs depends on how many bugs and issues we find. But yeah, I would consider this. We don't quite have this Ethereum development, but I'd consider today like the feature freeze of Pectra, and like maybe we do this blob stuff, maybe we don't, but we don't consider anything else. And then hopefully in the next month we get to a spec freeze.
Okay, so Devnet 4 is a good target before all core devs in 2 weeks to have that launched?
That would be great.
Or is that too optimistic? Or can we do sooner?
Perry said we could do 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean that feels like a good timeline because there's now still some changes that need to be made given the removal of the request from the EL block and some updates to the engine API.
And then the gas prices for, like, it's kind of small, but gas prices for BLS, and then a bunch of other small PRs. So yeah, I think 2 weeks is like realistic, but 1 week would feel very short. And obviously we can chat about this on next week's call, but if aiming to launch DevNet 4 for 2 weeks from now feels good.
Okay, so let's try and get all of the spec changes merged by early next week, definitely before all core devs next week. I think everything is open that we want to change about DevNet 4. I don't think that there's anything that's being discussed that doesn't have a PR yet. It's just a matter of putting them all into the specs, and then hopefully the week after DevNet 4 we can launch.
Yeah, I think I like that. DevNet 4 specs by ACDC, and then DevNet 4 live by ACDE.
Cool.
And we also have one more avenue for discussion. There's the testing call on Monday. So if there's some PR that, I don't know, needs some more discussion, please raise it and we can still do this synchronously on Monday. So we have everything closed by ACD next week.
Sounds great. Okay. Anything else before we wrap up? Great. Well, yeah. Thanks, everyone. Ending 5 minutes early. Got Pectra scoped, timeline for DevNet 4. Yeah, appreciate everyone's participation, and we'll talk to you all very soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.